Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, how to navigate the ups and downs of life with kids on your own while keeping sane. We cover all manner of subjects from domestic violence, dealing with childhood trauma, through to fussy eaters and how to help your kids become resilient. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. This week's guest, Rob Rohde, is the driving force behind The Business of Being Dad, a transformative podcast of growth-minded fathers who inspire to be extraordinary. Drawing on 25 years of experience in pediatric healthcare and an MS in management and leadership, Rob, a single father of 5 daughters who tragically lost their mum to suicide, overcame profound personal challenges to become a coach for single fathers. As the visionary behind the Single Father Mastery Coaching Program, Rob shares profound insights on fatherhood, leadership, and legacy. Through his transformative journey, he developed a practical framework to help single fathers overcome challenges, gain clarity, and build life-changing relationships with their kids. This is the Strong, Single and Human podcast. Hi, Rob Rohde. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I am so happy to be here. It's exciting to get a chance to chat with your audience.
No, I'm just so pleased we've got a bloke on. We've got a bloke on the podcast because I love talking to ladies, don't get me wrong, but you men don't talk about a lot of your single dad experiences, what you're going through, how you deal with it and all of that stuff. So it's awesome that I've got a single dad on the podcast to just talk to the blokes out there and give them a bit of advice. So look, let's just go back to the beginning and start by just telling people how you became a single dad and how many kids you've got and all of that sort of thing.
Sure. So I'll just reintroduce myself. I am Rob Rohde, and I am a single father coach. And just to start off, my goal is to really help single fathers build amazing, fantastic relationships with their kids, first and foremost, but to also do that without having to sacrifice their careers or their dreams in the process, really chasing after that full, thriving life. And so that's what I'm all about. And I just have a passion for working with single dads. I mean, that has been my experience, and we're going to talk a lot about that. But I am a single father to 5 daughters. Their ages now are 15 to 29. And so some people would say... So the easy
years then. The easy years, Rob.
That's what people try to tell me, but it doesn't always feel that easy.
By no stretch of the imagination are they easy. I can vouch for that. But yeah, sorry, carry on. I interrupted.
Yeah, so I will admit I have more free time now than I did when the kids were younger, but the problems that we encounter are so much larger and so much more expensive, when we do have challenges at this point. So it's one thing to work with your toddlers on how to share a toy, and it's another thing entirely different to talk through through relationships and values and integrity with your teenage daughters. And so it's an kind of an evolution or growth that you have to go through as a parent, as your kids grow. But I love it. I love being a father, and it might not be, society might not think that this is cool to say, but I love being a single father. It's fantastic. I mean, I really enjoy my time with my kids, and I feel like we are in a groove right now, but it hasn't always been that way. When I first became a single father, my youngest daughter was less than a year old. And so, that was 14 plus years ago. And so I've been going through this for a while now. And I will say I have always been what I would consider involved in my kids' lives, even when I was married. And, none of that has changed, but it was a clear difference the moment I became a single father. And I went from this feeling of kind of a confidence in what I was doing and feeling like I had a partner that I was doing this with to feeling completely overwhelmed and this pressure, this weight that was on my shoulders. And, not even to mention the fact of, as a man, how could I show my daughters the right way to go about life? How could I relate to them and connect with them as a couple of them were in their teenage years at that time. And so, all of that to say that it was just very overwhelming. And, I was working a lot and I was so focused in on that providing aspect of being a dad or being a parent or single parent that I let myself go. I let my health go. I let my personal care go. And I also started to kind of see the consequences on my relationships with my kids as well. Um, when you're a single parent, you have limited time with your children. That's just a part of the package. Even if you're fortunate, as I know that I was at that time, to have 50-50 custody as a dad, that's still half as much time as I used to have. And so it becomes very important to use that time to the fullest. And, I'm sure we'll talk about that more as we dive into this conversation. But initially it was overwhelming. Initially I felt isolated. Initially I felt alone. And if I'm being honest, even today, I made a lot of mistakes and, I still do. But there was this moment that I'll share with you where I was struggling in my relationship with my oldest daughters, and I was driving. I pulled into the driveway to pick up my kids for their parenting time with me. All five daughters at that time, and my oldest two refused to come over. They
Wow.
just didn't want. Yeah, they just didn't want to hang out with me. They were upset at me. It was my choice to end the marriage, and I feel like they probably blamed me, at a certain aspect on that. And if I'm being honest, they had a right to be mad at me because I wasn't living my best life at that point in time. And I have to admit that looking back. But in the moment, that was not where my head was, In the moment, I was angry and I started making excuses and started blaming, at least maybe not to her face, but in my head, I started having these thoughts racing like, what is my ex-wife saying about me that is causing my kids to feel like this? Or, I started getting upset at my daughters for, being at what I felt at the time was ungrateful for all the things that I had done for them and the sacrifices I had made. And at my job for the demands that were placed on me and all the hours I was working. But none of that was helping me, right? I mean, that was just this place of making excuses. And, you know, there was this period of time where I sat in that place, and then something very simple just kind of clicked inside me where I started to kind of recognize that, okay, Rob, do you want to improve your relationship with the kids or not? And I did. And so I needed to start looking at myself and the things that I could control. And all that sounds good in theory, but it was still hard to do. Um, and there was this kind of moment where I was sitting alone in my room. My daughters were all at their mom's house for her parenting time. And I was listening to this leadership podcast and I heard these words. And the words were, well, first of all, it wasn't a parenting podcast. It wasn't about parenting at all, but it was about leadership. And the words were, how has your leadership contributed to this result? But when I heard those words, I internalized them and immediately started thinking of my older daughters. And I had to ask myself, Rob, how has your parenting contributed to this fractured relationship, to this result? And it might seem simple, but it kind of changed my mindset from this place of feeling like everything was happening to me that I had no control over, and being in this place of feeling like a victim, to feeling like, it's an overused word, but to feeling kind of empowered, to just feeling like I had a decision on how my future turned out. And I had the ability to kind of take my life by the horns and decide what kind of future I wanted to have. And, that was the catalyst that led towards me really focusing in on my growth and really focusing in on learning everything I could possibly learn about leadership and personal growth and parenting daughters and parenting teenagers and parenting boys, even though I didn't have boys. I just wanted to learn whatever I could learn. And that was kind of the beginning of my kind of personal transformation.
Yeah, and I know when you were listing, I was thinking about it when you were listing the frustrations that you have, and like, but it's natural, right? Like at the end of the day, you do get frustrated because you can't go and do what you need to do because you have children. You get frustrated because you can't do what you want to do with your children because you're working, right? So they are all natural feelings that you were going through as well, right? But the one thing is, you can reframe those feelings to a more positive aspect, can't you? And go from there and move forward with what you need to do.
Yes,
It takes time though, doesn't it? It does take time because all of the stuff that you've been doing, right? It like was not an overnight like learning, was it?
absolutely. It takes time. And I appreciate you bringing that up, um, as something that and only another single parent probably can relate to, is that, we talk about these things sometimes in past tense, and other people can hear this that might be listening and think, oh, so it was as simple as that. He just decided to, he just decided he wanted to be a better person. And so he was. No, it was a couple of year period of me kind of finding my way to that point. And then another couple of years, really, even all the way to this day, here we are 14 years later, where I am still actively and intentionally needing to work on improving my relationship with my older girls. But I can say that since I kind of opened that door, that the process for that involved me changing the way that I was parenting them, and to really start to say, well, I have to start here. Actually, the first step was taking ownership of my mistakes and then acknowledging those to my daughters and acknowledging to them that they did not get the best version of me. They got a very flawed version, and admitting my mistakes and asking them for their forgiveness. That was the first step that a lot of us skip. But I mean, that was monumental. That I feel like that broke the ice a little bit. And it also was freeing to me as an individual. But then even after that, I had to commit to trying to connect with them and trying to relate to them and trying to reach out to them no matter what. And what I mean by that is regardless of the response that I got. And so, and that process took a few years. It was a full, probably 18 months before they came over to my house again. And then
And it's
once they,
hard, isn't it? It's hard because, and the thing is, right, I think also going back to what you said, right, it's about actually going and owning it, but then not going, but this is what you contributed to the situation as well, right? Because that's not you owning it, right? That's you like owning a bit of it, but then like, okay, they may have contributed to the situation, right? Or your mindset or what, but you've got to own it as in what you did. And then they have to decide whether they own what they've done. And if they don't own it, well, what can you do? You can't influence them, change them.
that is such a great point. Sorry for talking over you for a second, but that is such a great point. And basically what you're saying is that I might come to a place of forgiveness and ready to reconnect before they do. And I have to allow them to get there at their own pace and to go through their own work. But as a father, it was important to me that they knew that no matter what, I was not going to stop fighting, that I was going to, there was not a part of me that was willing to give up, even though there was a part of me that might maybe wanted to in order to protect my emotions or protect my heart, I'll just say. But I wasn't willing to do that. And I'm glad that I wasn't, because many years later, they are a huge part of my life and I'm a big part of their life. And I'm so thankful for that. But there's a couple other things I think that are really important. If you don't mind, I'll jump into as far as how that happened.
Yeah,
When
no.
yeah. So when they started coming over, it was maybe just for like a birthday celebration or a dinner. And again, that was after probably a solid 18 months. And, but when they did, I didn't come up with this all by myself, but at the suggestion of a mentor and a big part of my support system, I made the decision for a full year, once they started coming over, to not offer a single piece of advice, to simply listen. They were teenagers at this time. They were now 17, at that time. And so all I did was listen and ask questions. And that is so counterintuitive, probably for
Mm.
all parents, but especially for men, because we want to fix things,
Oh
right?
my
I mean, we want
God,
to
you're so
protect.
annoying.
I,
So annoying. Especially from
I
a
mean,
female's perspective, because we go, we don't want you to fix stuff. We just want you to listen, right? We'll sort our own problems out. So yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, when you're right, you're right. I can't argue with
Yeah.
it. So,
Sorry.
but my, but where I'm going with that is it wasn't as easy as what I'm making it to sound like. I mean, it took intentionality, and I have to say, if they had been living with me on a consistent basis, that would have been really tough. But I was able to prepare myself and get into that place, that state of mind where I would just listen. But something amazing and incredible happened during that process. And what I often refer back to as just this unintended benefit that I would have never seen coming. I really learned so much about them during that time. I'm almost embarrassed to say how little I actually knew prior to that, but I really learned pieces of their personality and how they responded to things, and not to mention just their interests and their passions that had kind of grown and evolved over the couple years that we weren't really a part of each other's lives. And I am so thankful for that. I am not thankful for the lost time. I'm not thankful that I made all of these mistakes, but I'm thankful that during this healing process, I was able to learn so much about them, and that helped our relationship and helped my ability to connect with them, um, and so on moving forward. So I'm very thankful for that in spite of the situation.
Because also they're all their own different individuals, aren't they? I mean, you've got 5 different personalities, and I'm sure they're all completely different. I only have one, thank God. I don't know what I'd do if I had 5. Um, and 5 girls as well, because that would be 6 of us in the same house. Hormones probably all connecting in at the same time. It would be like a war zone, right? But yeah, and wow, and you're a dad who's had to deal with all of that as well, right? So yeah, hats off to you there, because yeah, just having one girl would be a nightmare. I'm imagining it that time of the month. Having 5 is going to be like definitely a minefield, let me put it that way. God love them, and we all go through it. And I know women get a bit grumpy about the PMT situation, right? And it all affects us differently. And I'm now the other end of the PMT situation and doing the menopause, but we do all go through it, right? We can't ignore it anymore. I think ignoring it makes it worse, but we're not talking about that. Um, but yes, so okay, let's go into it then. What were some of your biggest challenges that you've faced? And that seems like a pretty big one, right? Connecting back in with, and I've just been through. I know my son is only 8, but I feel as though I'm entering the tweenies before I need to. The attitudes, the situation. I don't know, kids. I think tweenies has gone from like 10 to 8, right, at the moment. But yeah, I've just gone through that 2 or 3 months of not being connected. We are not connected at all. Heads in iPads, me working lots of hours. And so you have to consciously make a change, right? So, yeah, I'm trying to consciously make a change. But oh my God, it's hard to listen and not react, especially when you get an attitude thrown at you. But yeah. So hats off to you there. But what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced, right? Because like you had 5 and they seem
Yeah.
to be ranging from like under 1 to what would the girls have been like 13 or something like that? Was it 14?
Yeah. When I first became a single father, they were, 14, 15, kind of, my oldest daughters were that range. Yeah. So, yeah, well, I will say that some of the biggest challenges that were specific to being a single dad really involved just what I've heard one other podcaster refer to as like being the cruise director, like trying to manage all aspects of their life, all of the meetings and all of the appointments. And, I had my daughters at the time when I had shared custody. I had my daughters Monday through Thursday. And so I had them during the week. And then I worked weekends in healthcare. And so, yeah, I had them for school, and I scheduled the doctor's appointments and took them to the dentist and, did those things. And their mom was involved also. But that was my parenting time. And so I needed to step into that. And I will say, on a personal level, the hardest thing for me was that at that time, I just didn't really like hanging out with people. I didn't like, like having to meet all these other parents and having to develop relationships with them. But I was a single dad of daughters. And so my daughters wanted to have their friends over. And so if parents are going to allow their daughters to go over to someone's house there's no woman there, it is only the dad, they're going to need to know that dad, and they're going to need to be able to trust that dad. And so I recognized that pretty early. And so I got over myself and, started becoming more active around school. I started volunteering in their classroom so that the teachers would get to know me and the people around the school would, so that they could, essentially vouch for me or whatever. I wasn't necessarily looking for that, but that's what happened. It was more just an idea of wanting to get to know them and wanting to be more active in my kid's life. And, I didn't have weekends, and I didn't have these large chunks of time when they weren't in school. So I wanted to maximize the time that I did have. And so, I'd meet with them for lunches, and I'd volunteer, and I'd be there waiting for them. Pardon me. I'd be there waiting for them when they got out of class. And then I started trying to meet the parents. And for those on audio, you didn't see me kind of roll my eyes there. I apologize for that, but it's kind of how I felt initially. It was work, but it was great because I ended up developing this support system of other parents who just appreciated the fact that I was actively involved in my kids' lives. And they, pretty quickly started to recognize that I wasn't someone they needed to be concerned about. But, I'm sure there was still some concern here and there, especially for things like sleepovers. And so that was one of the big challenges. And it might sound simple, but just simply putting myself out there, because that wasn't within my personality, especially at that point in my life. And then another
And also you're tired though, right? You you've got 5 girls to look after, get ready in the morning, sort out, get to school, get sorted. And it does take effort, right? And also you're dealing with a relationship separation, right? Which isn't like, I know we haven't like discussed and talked about it, but there's a lot of emotions and things that goes on with that as well, right? So, but I must admit, I'm sitting here smirking, right? Because I'm going, oh, okay. So I could imagine what it would be like around the schoolyard, being a mum, right? Did you get like beeline from any of the other single mums? Like, did they go, "Oh, single dad, this is great. He seems to care about his kids." And like, did they beeline for you to like want to date and do all of that? Because I've had a few, like, I know a few single dads, right? And they're like, "Oh, this is good," chatting up the single mums at the so, like, did you get inundated with like offers, single dad, school, girls?
Honestly, no. I mean, you're making it
Oh,
sound so
what?
glamorous,
Where are you going?
but you know
Maybe
what?
we just
I
in Australia.
That wasn't the place. That just wasn't the place I was in, and so I
No, and
tend to
that's
be
fair
kind of
enough.
I tend to be kind of dense about that type of stuff. So it could have been happening, and I didn't even recognize it. But
Okay,
I will say
dear
this
me.
though. I mean, I will say this. I think that there was a level of kind of respect that I built, among other parents, both moms and dads, married or single, and the teachers and the people around the classroom, because even though it's more common than it used to be, it is pretty rare to have, a father kind of that involved. And, so I didn't get hit on, I didn't have like nobody was, knocking on my door ready to hang out, but I did feel like I was building friendships, both with the men and women. And, in my youngest daughters were either in elementary school or even before that. And so it was all people within our exact neighborhood. And so it was nice to be able to meet people, to hang out with at the pool, and to meet up at the park, and to have like play dates at each other's houses. And, so it was nice to have other individuals in my life like that. And,
Yeah,
initially, the initial response was actually probably the opposite of what you're describing. And it was more of oh, we need to be aware of this individual. And so my whole goal was just to break that down and to, um, to be respectful of that, but also to kind of break down that wall a little bit, and to open the doors for my kids to be able to have a normal social life. That's all I wanted. It wasn't, that was my focus.
yeah. No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. And that's admirable because it's a focus on the kids basically at the end of the day. And yeah,
But
no,
now
that's
I feel
fair.
like I missed out on this great opportunity, the way you're describing
Wow.
it,
Maybe
of
it's
what
just
could have been.
Australia. I don't know. Maybe you didn't notice it. I don't know. But yeah, no, yeah, I've just been around maybe too many single mums. I don't really care. I'm too old to worry about it. But yeah, the younger ones, oh my God. Watch out, people. But yeah, mind you, that's what you got dating apps for nowadays, it would seem. So yeah, all good. So you were sorry. So I in the tangently conversation around did you get hit on at school? You were then heading down another avenue. So you were then saying about other challenges that you had.
Yeah. So again, like a big piece of that was just around the organization. And so I grew up in a very structured home, and that came from my mom. And she's still that way to this day. And I have inherited those qualities, and I'm thankful for them, especially as a single dad. I am all about my habits, my routines, my systems, and I relied on those. It took a while to kind of flesh those out and to figure out what would work, where it didn't feel like it was regimented, but it felt like there was boundaries and structure. And I do feel, I mean, I think there's pretty good research to support this, that kids do better in a more structured environment. They do need free time, but they do need structure around meals and bedtime and, a lot of things in their life. And so that part came easy for me once I leaned into the fact that I had these skills. I already had these skills, and I just needed to figure out how to use them within my house and within my home.
Did it
And
make it
that's
easier? Like having those structures, did it make it easier? I guess you've got 5 children, but did it make it easier regarding work and things like that as well to actually, because you're still working. We've all got to still work, haven't we?
Yeah, I am very fortunate. Again, once I probably after that first year or so, and I was able to kind of dial in some things at work and at home. I work in healthcare. They're long hours, long shift hours, and I also work nights. And had the ability to I had the ability to only work when I didn't have my kids. And so after a while, after that year or so, I almost never worked when I had my kids. I worked every Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, and then I would have my kids Monday morning, and then and then Thursday they would go over to their moms. We would share Thursdays as part of our 50-50. And so I had one night to myself every other week, I guess you could say. And then, but how many dads get to say that, that the entire time they have their kids, they don't have to work at all, especially during the week. So I recognize that I was blessed and I was fortunate. But I do think that there are things we can do as parents. There often are things that we can do in order to to leverage the time that we do have and to move things around in order to maximize the amount of free time we have when we do have our kids, especially when we are in a shared custody situation. And I think sometimes we feel like, oh, I couldn't possibly talk with my employer about this, or I couldn't possibly, make this work or free up more time. But by simply having the conversation, I mean, I think that we are often surprised at the doors that are opened, by simply having that conversation, or even just looking at our own life and how we're spending our times. Like, so I think that there's options out there that we need to explore and we need to be open to if in fact our top priority is to free up time for our kids.
Yeah. And look, post-COVID has made it slightly like, oh my God, I must have been the only person who was pretty happy about COVID because it meant I didn't have to go in the office. So I could work from home, which meant that all of the things that I was having to put on hold or whatever regarding my child, I could get done. So putting wash loads on, dusting and cleaning the house and stuff like that. I could have a 10-minute break and I could go around and do a couple of rooms or whatever. Preparing dinner, like if you work a 9 to 5 as a single parent, right? If you're 9 to 5, then you get home, it's 6 o'clock. If you've got like my son was 5 at the time, and so he would be in daycare and just starting school, and getting home and then having to prepare dinner and feed him at like 6:30 or whatever was just hell on earth, right? So yeah, so it was a big advantage. And I suppose COVID proved that we can work from anywhere, right? We don't actually need to be in the office full time. I'm not an advocate of working from home full time. I think there are advantages of being in the office, but that you can do it part time. So, I mean, my role, and I manage people means that my guys have to be in the office 3 days, same as I do, and we work from home 2 days, and it's great. And we get to choose, that we usually one day where we're all in the office together, and then we can choose whatever else we want to do with our other 4 days. So it's a lot easier, I think. But I do think you men do have the shitty end of the stick in the fact that and I think it's still happening at the moment, and hopefully over the next few years it won't. But I find that being a single mum is a lot easier on me if my child is ill, if I've got to go to an appointment. Nobody really bats an eyelid if I go, oh, I need to leave early because I've got to take my kid to swimming, or I've got to go and do X, Y, and Z, or I'm going to work from home today because my child is ill, right? Whereas I don't think men have the same flexibility, and people have a different attitude to single dads. It's almost like they go, well, why can't your wife do that? Your ex-wife, sorry, because you're single. But why can't your ex-partner or your ex-wife do that? Why do you have to do that? So I don't know. I don't know. What's your opinion, Rob?
Yeah.
I'm from the other side, as it were.
Yeah. I think that there are so many layers to what you're talking about. And, to just be very like specifically what you're talking about, like within the workplace and things like that, I think that it is changing very, very slowly, but in general, it is absolutely true, right? I mean, it it catches people off guard. It catches an employer off guard if I would be to come up to them and say, "Hey, I need to leave a little bit early today to pick up my daughter or to do this," and they're just not expecting that. And so I think that, and I think that it feels like they can be a little bit more harsh with their response to that, a little bit less sensitive with it. But I absolutely acknowledge that, and also acknowledge the kind of the way that society has kind of hurt us as single fathers, in the way that the lack of support and the lack of policy and the lack of things like you're talking about here as well. So I believe, though, this is the mentality that I've taken for myself is, yes, we absolutely need to acknowledge that and not try to push it under the rug and try to fight for what's right. But also, I can only control what I can control. And I try to live in this place of not making excuses for my actions or for my circumstances. And I really try to work with other men on that too. And again, it's not about, I am absolutely sensitive to what others are going through. And in fact, maybe to a point of fault. But when I hear them share the struggles and the pains and stuff that they are going through, the difficulties and the loneliness and feeling like they have no support and worried they're going to lose their kids, I literally feel the pain that they're feeling, because I fall back into that place of when I was there and I remember what it felt like. So it's not that I'm not sensitive to that. I am just recognizing that it doesn't help us to sit in that place. It only helps us to think about what we can do to move through it, what we can do to maximize the time we have and to try to leverage that. What conversations can we have with our employer to try to work through that? And, that's the attitude that I try to take. And, again, it's trying to live in this place of taking ownership of things that I can control.
And I think that's a good comment that you just made, right? For want of my brain not working at 7 a.m. Because it's about taking ownership. And actually, I'm very lucky because my employer is very much like family first, right? Do what you need to do. Anyone ill, accidents, whatever. And it doesn't matter if it's children, it's anyone in the family. So I'm very lucky. But it is about taking that ownership and going, this is my situation. So, let's try and work as an employer and an employee together and make this work. And it is about you owning that. It's not about you moaning and whinging about the employer and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, the employer may be unfair, right? So go and get another, easier said than done, but get another job or find another way that you can try and work together. I think sometimes it's about saying, hey, I'd like to stay with this company and but this is my situation. And so how do we work this through? In this day and age, your employer should be able to work with you, or but yeah, it's still like we're still not there yet. We're still definitely not there yet with the father's situation, and there's so many things that are stacked up against you, Dad, and it's almost like we see you as some alien nation that's out there. I know you come from Mars and we're from Venus, or whatever the book may say, right? But the thing is, you have feelings, you have emotions, you have things that you deal with the kids, just like the mums, right? But people don't tend to see that the same way.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great point that you're bringing up. And just to expand on that, it's not just that people don't see that in the same way, but I think a lot of us as men don't want to own that. We don't want to own our emotions and our feelings. And we feel that it's a sign of, there's still a lot of people out there that feel that that is a sign of weakness, that we are meant to be this rock that, provides stability. And, any emotion outside of maybe anger, we choose not to express, and we try to push back, or we feel almost embarrassed if we allow ourselves to express that. And that is something I am passionate about, because and you opened the door for me to kind of talk about it. But I firmly believe that the most important thing that we can do as parents is build a strong connection with our kids. And it's not that there aren't other things that are important. It's just that everything we want to do as parents becomes easier when it comes from a starting point of being in a connected relationship. And it is impossible, I would argue, to have a truly close and connected relationship as fathers if we don't allow our kids to see our feelings and our emotions. And so I think that is a necessity for us. It's something that, as I talked about myself earlier, I'm going to talk to other men out there. We need to get over ourselves and allow ourselves to do that, because if we are saying that our kids are the most important thing to us, or even that our kids are extremely important to us, then we need to step into this, and we need to allow ourselves to do that. And the reason why I feel that connection is so important is, I talk often about there being like kind of three pillars of parenting. And I view that as being connection, protection, and instruction. And protection, of course, involves standing between our kids in danger, but also in providing for them and providing them a safe environment an environment and a home and a culture where they feel safe and protected. And that is so much easier to do. It's so much easier to set boundaries with our kids when we're connected with our kids, when they know where our heart is and when they feel close to us. It is so much easier to try to instruct them, to try to teach them, to try to talk with them about values and about morals and about, life lessons. They will absorb it so much deeper, and they will take the time to listen and hear you out when they feel close with you. And that comes from that place of connection. And I think that we as fathers, again, can err, as I did early in my single father career. We can err on the side of discipline over connection, and that's to our detriment. We do need to provide boundaries and structures and guardrails, but connection is so much more important.
Yeah. And that's and getting connection is about listening and understanding that your kids are their own little individual people, right? With their own values, right? And it was funny, I was talking to somebody the other day around recognizing what your own value system is, right? And I thought, we get our values from our parents. But no, we're all born with our own set of values. And then our behaviors are formed out of our values, right? And potentially our behaviors are influenced by the people that are around us, parents, schools, whatever, as to how we react when our values are don't want to use abuse, but when our values are overstepped or when our values aren't respected, there we go. That's the word. So, yeah, no, I want to go back to that, the emotional side of single daddom, as it were. And I agree with you, right? I think it is about showing our children also that we can make mistakes, right? Because I think there is so many times where our kids go, "Oh, I can't make a mistake. I can't mess up." Um, Whereas we need to demonstrate that we mess up. That's what the human part of this podcast is about, right? We mess up. We, like you said, right? And I've done it lots. There's no handbook with the kids, right? We're just muddling through, dealing with it as best we can. A lot of the time, the blueprint about how we were brought up and what influenced us when we were younger sort of creeps to the surface as well. Even though we may have read all of the books, it's all about, how, it's our blueprint, and it's our parents have got a blueprint from their parents, and it's passed down through the generations, right? And you can change that blueprint, but it takes time and it takes effort, right? But how when you were going through those emotions, right? And I know you say we've got to show them, we've got to demonstrate. What was your outlet? What was your how did you deal with, because it's one to show emotion, right? But we don't want to be putting emotion on the children, right? We don't want to be, offloading ourselves and what we're going through onto the kids, right? So how did you do that? Because as a bloke, you don't tend to talk to your mates like us women, and there's not much out there for men.
Yeah. You are so right about, there's a fine line, right? The way I often word it or phrase it is that we don't ever, from in expressing our emotions or expressing our feelings standpoint, we don't ever want to put ourselves in a position, or sorry, we don't ever want to put our kids in a position where they feel like they have to take care of us. I mean, if that is what we want to avoid. And so, when we have those types of emotions and those types of feelings, we need to have peers that we can lean on for that. Family, brothers, sisters, parents, aunts, uncles, or friends. And if we don't have those, then we need to seek out, individuals within that space. And so I'm glad you pointed out that distinction. What I am referring to and what I think is important is that if I make a mistake, and my kids know that I made a mistake, whether they know it or not, actually, if I make a mistake and I blow up at my kids, and it's one thing to come back to them and say, look, I am sorry. I should not have talked to you that way. And that is great. That is huge. That helps build that connection. But to take it one step further might be to share, I was really upset about this meeting that didn't go well at work, and it's been on my mind and I've been stressing out about it, and I took it out on you guys, and that was wrong, and I should not be doing that, and I'm sorry. And so we are sharing with them that we're sharing with them emotions. We're acknowledging that we allow that emotion to cause a negative behavior in us. And we're, I guess to take it a step further would be to share, this is what I will do next time.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if you are in that situation, here's what you could do with that emotion instead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely important, because you're demonstrating that if there's stuff worrying and they fly off the handle, that they can think about it, go away, think about it, come back, say, oh, and it's quite funny because I know my son's only 8, but I'm trying to teach him that if he talks to people a certain way, then even though it's stuff going on in his life, right, that those people may never trust him again, or they may have, they may form a belief of who he is, which isn't true. So he's got to understand and get some, I know this is a buzzword, but emotional intelligence, even at 8, around dealing with his friends and, what goes on there. Because there are consequences to all our actions, right? And everything we say and do. And it's quite funny. It's quite poignant at the moment because we were supposed to go and see Tenacious D in Australia. It's one of his favorite bands. And 5 words that JP said, and they're no more. No gigs. They've ruined everything for us. They've ruined everything for them. And it was just through 5 words that were said. And I don't know if it's got over in your media, over where you are in the States or wherever. But yeah, I'm not going to repeat it on here, but it was massive in Australia. And yeah, they've gone home, which was sad because we could have all been having a great party on Saturday night in Melbourne, and it's not going to happen. And it was a good segue into telling my son it's very important what you say, right? And how you say it. So, yeah, that was good. What about self-care then? Because I know we talked and we've directed it a lot of the kids, and I know we've talked about the emotional side of things. And there's a big buzz thing in the single mum world, which is like, you've got to put on your oxygen mask before you can like put on the kids' oxygen masks and all of those, scenarios. And I just, from a dad's perspective, what about self-help and like your self-care for you guys?
Yeah. And, I believe that. I mean, I believe in that as well, that we do need to take care of ourselves. And so in my head, intuitively, I know that to be true, but I have not lived that in my life for the majority of my single parent life. But it is something that I am very focused on over these last couple of years. But I just want to be transparent and honest that I am not doing that anywhere near perfectly at this point.
I don't think any of us are really. But yeah.
And, it falls into what I talked about earlier a little bit about not necessarily the emotion, but just feeling like you need to take care of your kids. And, I feel like I'm going off on a slight tangent, but one of the biggest kind of lies we are told as single parents in particular is that we should always put our kids first. And I think that is especially damaging to hear those words as a single parent, because we already have this guilt and this sense of feeling of selfishness every time we do something for ourselves. And it's just not right. I mean, since when is it selfish to be healthy? Since when should we feel guilt about trying to get a good night's sleep? I just think that is very flawed. And so I do not take that approach anymore. And I've specifically had this conversation with my daughters where they know where I come from on this. And at first they're like, what do you mean we don't come first? But as we talked about it a little bit more, I believe that is one of the best things I can do for them as parents. And it goes so much beyond, you got to put your own oxygen mask on before you can put theirs on. That is a part of it, right? I do need to build into myself, because a healthy version of Rob is much more patient with his daughters. A rested version of me is able to be more active and energetic around my kids. And I could go on and on, but this is the other piece of that. And it's a huge piece. And it's that our kids learn more by watching the way that we live our life than by anything else that we say, anything else we could tell them or teach them. And so they are going to watch. Your son is watching you. My daughters are watching me. And I want my daughters to know that they can both be a great mom and a working mom. I want them to know that they can build a great home life for their family and have their dream life. That it's not one or the other. I want them to know that all doors are open to them and it's all possible. And so I have started becoming much more intentional and living my life in a way that tries to model that for them.
Yeah.
Not perfectly, but that is my goal.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. It's hard. It definitely is hard. And the kids don't make it easy either sometimes. They're like, oh, you're going out again, or you're doing this again, or what about me? What? So that doesn't make it easy either. But yeah, I think in us actually as single parents, showing that balance in our lives is good, and that we have time for them and we're working and we have time for ourselves, we're also instilling self-care in them and instilling that self-care for them is important. So what they choose is important for themselves. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know, Rob. So look, thank you for coming on the podcast. Have you, like, where can people find you if they want to talk to you, find out more information, see what you're doing, regarding your single dadness? Because you're right there online.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I was looking forward to this. And I have to tell you, it's not very often I get to have a conversation, one single parent to another. And this has been fun. So
Yeah, thank
I
you.
appreciate it. But as far as where people can find me, really where I like to send people these days is to my LinkedIn. So I
Okay.
am at Rob Rohde, and that's ROBROHDE. And I post every day, and that's where you'll find, really what I try to produce some solid content that's designed for single fathers, but it's also single moms, and also all parents really. So that's the place to go. That's what I am most active in from a social media standpoint. And then there's also links on there where you could, jump on a free call with me if you just want to dive deeper into something. And I often, will lead people from there to other places as well. People aren't on social media for whatever reason, then you can also find me at my website, which is robrohde.com.
Cool. Okay, that's brilliant. Well, Rob, look, thank you for coming on the podcast, having a chat with us. I love getting single dads on the podcast because it's great to have your view of what's going on, and I just don't think you get the shitty end of the stick. So it's great to actually give some support to the single dads.
I love that. Thank you so much. I appreciate you kind of shining a light on that. And it's been fun. You can have me back anytime.
We would love to. Well, look, I wish you all the best with everything that you're doing. People, go and get on LinkedIn and investigate Rob, as it were. Don't stalk him too much. And yeah, and thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you would like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content you want to hear just like this. If you want to check out our past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey, and Twitter. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one is perfect. We're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single and Human podcast.